Hey friends, I am back in the office today and I got a little story to tell you about real estate. It's anecdotal and it's only for learning purposes. If you are considering buying a property, especially one in the country, you want to get this one because the person that nearly bought this property almost didn't get the house they thought they were buying. Several years ago, there had been an auction on a farm and it didn't sell. There was a reserve on the auction and it hadn't sold. Sellers contacted me to list the property and sell it. And there was two tracts. There was it was a large farm. So there was the larger tract of crop ground and some timber, and then there was a 10-acre tract that had a very, very nice home that looked out over this cliff and out across the river valley, and it was just gorgeous. Big deck across the front of it. I mean, it's one of those houses that you want to wake up in every morning. Awesome house. So there was this 10 acres, had this awesome house on the cliff, and there was a barn and a nice driveway and all this stuff. So we were going to sell the 10 acres in the home and then the remaining crop ground. Now, keep in mind, they had just almost sold this at auction until they had said no and then turned it over to me. And I started doing my research and I pulled up the county records and the GIS maps. Now, if you're buying property, I recommend you go to the county that you're on and pull up the GIS maps and just look at it. There's a lot of information there. There's floodplains. Maybe several years of different aerial photos so you can see whether ponds go dry and stuff like that. GIS has a ton of neat information on it. It's not always correct, okay? Keep in mind the lines that they draw are not always correct. But on this particular one, when I was looking at it, the house wasn't on the 10 acres. Well, that is really odd that they could be that far off. I got a little drawing here that I'm going to show you. But as you can see on this particular property, you've got the entire farm and you have this 10 acres right here. And you can see that what I found was the house sitting over here closer to the better view, the bluff. What had happened is Daddy had given her 10 acres to build her new home on, off that corner of his farm. Her and her husband went out and they was laying out their house and the barn and the driveways and all that stuff. And she said, "Oh, honey, I just want that house up closer to that cliff. It just would be better. We had a better view if we was just closer to the edge of that rock bluff." And so she just scooted it over onto Dad's land and built her house. That's the way it was for about 40 years. Nobody said a thing until the estate had to be settled. What we found out, I looked at it and I thought, boy, that doesn't seem right. That's an awful big mistake for GIS. They're not perfect, but they're a little better than that. So what we did was we had it surveyed, and sure enough, they had moved the entire foundation off of the property that her dad had deeded to her, and they actually built on his land. In the auction, they had almost sold that 10 acres, and the buyer thinking they were getting the house, they wouldn't have got the house because the house wasn't on the 10 acres. It was just lucky that my intuition, for some reason, kicked in and said, we better survey and find out what this was. To make a long story short, they almost bought the farm and didn't get the house. The guy that bought the farm almost got the house. So close call right there. Here's what I want you to remember when you're out in the country looking at properties. Research them and ask yourselves questions, and don't just assume that because something is supposed to be some way, that's the way it is. There are ways to verify that what you're buying is what you're getting, and a survey is money well spent, because I can assure you, fence lines are never always on the property lines. There's just things you need to know that you may not know. For instance, pipelines. You may not realize there's a pipeline going through. A survey will find that. In this case, you can see they had the 10 acres. The house wasn't on it. They had the barn and the driveway on the 10 acres, so you had room to put your house over here maybe. If you would have bought in that 10 acres, you would have not gotten the house because it would have went with the other piece of land. So anyway, we figured it out, surveyed it out, we made the corrections with the estate, and the person that bought the 10 acres got a little extra land, and they got the house they intended to get in the first place. So hopefully that story helps you. You know, in my years of real estate, I just have stories after stories after stories that I could teach you about how to make sure you're getting what you're paying for. In this case, it was almost an unbelievable disaster, but we solved the problem, and that's what a good professional agent does. Hopefully that helps, and as always, I want you to have a blessed day.